Hi. If you're newly interested in the OSR, you may be choosing between Shadowdark or Old School Essentials for your campaign. They both promote old school gameplay, but they are quite different. My goal for today's video is a clear-eyed view on why you should choose one over the other and what you can expect during play. Now, personally, I love both these games, but they come from different places. I've been playing Shadowdark for 2 years, but played BX, Basic Expert, the basis for Old School Essentials, for close to 40 years. OSE and BX, it's like driving that classic car from the 1970s. Shadowdark is a modern car, but with retro styling. And if you've been weighing Old School Essentials versus Shadowdark, this video today is for you. Welcome to my channel. I'm John. This is a place I talk about Shadowdark, old school D&D, the OSR, the TSR era. Now, before I dive into the games, let's start with my definition, a brief definition of OSR gameplay. For me, old school play is based on exploration. You're exploring dungeons, you're exploring the wilderness through hex crawls, and both of those things put dangerous locations in front of the players, and then the story emerges from their actions and decisions interacting with those locations. As a player, your survival depends more on how you think and less on how your character's built. Now, both OSE and Shadowdark approach OSR gameplay a little differently. So let's start with what OSE is. OSE is an updated version of BX. This is what it's based on, Basic Expert. BX is arguably the most important version of Dungeons and Dragons of all time. How many people out there would say that that is their desert island game? Meaning if they could only play one version of D&D for the rest of their life, what would they be throwing in their suitcase to take with them to a desert island? I know me, I would be taking BX. And a lot of people feel that way. It simplified original Dungeons and Dragons. It expanded like this 1977 or 1978 Holmes edition, and it avoided a lot of the complexity of AD&D. BX is a great procedural dungeon crawler. And then with the addition of that blue book, the expert book, it expanded to be like a full campaign game, except it hasn't been available since like 1981. So along comes Old School Essentials, which in 2019, this is a retro clone of BX. It recreates all the BX stuff in this little compact package. So it's not a new game, but it is a new package of those great BX rules. And a big part of the genius of Old School Essentials is the presentation and the layout. You can see it's an updated layout. There's color. There's great indexes and table of contents. And for a long time, you couldn't get BX in print. I used to think to myself, Wizards of the Coast will never allow BX to go to print on demand. Because if they did, why would anyone buy any other edition of Dungeons and Dragons again? But that's just how I think. BX actually is available on print on demand. It happened sometime earlier this year. I'm not exactly sure when or even why. What I will say is that I am going to order a print on demand copy of each because who knows how long this is going to last. So I'm going to get a copy while I can. However, as much as I love BX, the play style is a little quirky. I would go so far as to say it's almost an acquired taste. And let's start by looking at how weak some of the characters are. So here are some of the tables for the cleric, the magic user, and the thief straight out of the OSE rulebook. You can see that cleric has no spells at level 1. So they're going into the dungeon as kind of a weak fighter. They can turn undead. They can't do any magic until they get to level 1, prove to their deity that they're capable of surviving at least a little while, and then they might be able to get a single Cure Wounds spell at level 2. If you're in 5e, you've got Magic Missile as a cantrip. You can shoot magic missiles every round, all day, ad infinitum. Your OSE magic user gets 1 per day, and then they're standing in the back holding a bag of prayers and daggers and just throwing stuff at monsters and hoping everyone else can keep them safe. And the thief has a 10% chance of succeeding at disarming a trap, or said another way, they have a 90% chance of dying when they're trying to disarm that trap. So it's a little bit of culture shock to see how weak those characters are if you're coming from a modern game. Demi-humans are handled a little differently. Elves, halflings, and dwarves, you don't mix up like I'm a dwarf priest or I'm a halfling thief or an elf fighter. You're just an elf or a halfling or a dwarf. And it's a race as class approach in BX. It's a little charming, but it could be quirky to modern players. And probably the big thing is just the lethality of the game. Player characters don't have a lot of hit points. There's no healing with those level 1 characters. And when you go to 0 hit points, you're just dead. And because of this, it's warped the play style a little bit. It's forced adaptations by players to survive at level 1. I think the biggest thing you see is that players hire help in town, retainers, hirelings, or NPCs that will travel with them for a cut of the treasure. And so you've got 4 players, but the players might go into the dungeon with like 10 characters, like this group we're seeing on the screen, because their ranks swell with the addition of these hired characters. And you see this in the adventures of the time period. So take something really popular like B2, Keep on the Borderlands, or module T1, The Village of Hamlet. Those are probably the 2 biggest iconic starting adventures for old school D&D campaigns. And in B2, in the Keep, you can hire different mercenaries and retainers at the tavern. There's a priest in town who will accompany the player characters, a higher level priest with some acolytes who promises to bring some needed healing with the group. In the Village of Hamlet, the Inn of the Welcome Wench probably has a half dozen NPCs that can be hired, along with men-at-arms. And then there's even a powerful ranger character in town, Elmo, who might go with the player characters. So in these old school dungeons, the player characters themselves were pretty weak. The players might be controlling that character as well as a couple NPCs or mercenaries out there. So they'd have several game pieces, and you're trying to outthink the dungeon. You might have to use craftier tactics like burning oil, or I mentioned the wizard with the bag of daggers and prayers, who's just standing in the back, throwing daggers and hoping to survive. The priest is doing the same thing. He can't do any magic, so he's got a sling stone that he's shooting and hoping that his hired guards will keep him alive. If this is the system you grew up with, that's just how Dungeons and Dragons was. But if you're a modern gamer who used to having like much more capable characters, it's probably a little bit of culture shock. But what are some great reasons for why you'd still play old school essentials? I think the number one reason is compatibility. You have access to the entire TSR catalog from the 1980s, and then the best of the best published by the OSR in the last, 15, 17 years or something like that. You could just play them as is. I mentioned the authentic old school feel. Yes, you get the chance to have your 5-player characters with 5 mercenaries or NPCs or retainers going with your group to expand the group and improve your survivability. And Old School Essentials is a complete game. This is going to have domains and castles and nautical adventures and kind of like the works all in one book. Hey, before we talk about Shadowdark, if you enjoy this type of content, please consider subscribing. Thank you. It helps my channel grow. And everyone who's already a subscriber, I appreciate you. Okay, so we've looked at Old School Essentials. Let's look at Shadowdark and why might you choose this one. For starters, let's talk about what Shadowdark is. It is built on 5e. So it uses 5e's D20 mechanics. That means it has 5e style abilities, 5e style ability checks. The combat is very much based on 5e. It's going to use things like advantage and disadvantage. Bounded accuracy means all the armor classes live within a range, so players don't need like ridiculous bonuses to hit high-level monsters. It's very much driving a dungeon crawl playstyle. So while 5e moved away from that, Shadowdark embraces it, and it is more survivable. It's added a 5e style death timer. So when characters go to 0 hit points, they're not instantly dead. Their compatriots have a few moments to try to like stabilize them and save them before they die. And then the author, Kelsey, surveyed the world of RPGs outside of Dungeons and Dragons and said, okay, what kind of innovations are out there in modern games that I can also bring into my game? So Shadowdark has things like luck tokens, which give the players the ability to do some rerolls, use a very fast-moving, simple initiative system. A roll to cast spells extends the beef or power of the spellcasters. It's a little high risk, high reward. The combination of no dark vision and a torch timer creates a lot of dungeon pressure at the table. And I love the random advancement. It makes leveling up a little wacky. What's Forrest Gump say? Life's like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get. Same with rolling on those talent tables. And then the ability checks, this part of the game's core ethos. The idea is that if your character is trained at something, they're good at it and they're going to exceed with no roll. They're going to succeed with no roll. However, if there's consequences or time pressure and you need a roll, make it a skill check. Thieves, for instance, in Shadowdark, they have advantage at all the thiefly stuff. So that means even where there's like consequences at play, the thief at level 1's probably going to succeed 60 to 70% of the time. So that's a big mindset shift from that OSE BX thief who's going to fail 90% of the time. And because these characters are more capable and they've got more things going for them in terms of magic and luck tokens and whatnot, how does this change the play style from OSE or BX? I think the biggest thing is that the players are expected to go into the dungeons and go on adventures with their core nuclear group without an army of henchmen, retainers, or NPCs going with them. So like that nuclear group of 4 characters in the picture could easily be a Shadowdark party. And in fact, there's no rules for retainers in the Shadowdark rules at all, kind of against the spirit of the game because Shadowdark's supposed to move really quickly. And so the game limits how many things a person can do each round. It limits how much they need to think about. And we don't want the player sitting back and having to move 2 to 4 different game pieces each round. Some of the things, though, that are benefits tied to that, the buzzword we hear is low cognitive overhead. It's very easy for referees to pick up and run. It's very easy for players to pick up and play. I've been at multiple conventions where we're onboarding new people in less than 10 minutes and throwing them into a game. And so Shadowdark ends up being a great on-ramp to 1980s style dungeon crawling for modern players. Now, time out. Before I make recommendations on which one you should pick, I'm going to say this. You should do both. Everyone should do both. You haven't lived until you've taken that 1 or 2 hit point magic user through an old school dungeon with all sorts of retainers in front of you, and managed to like nurse them along until they have 2,500 experience points and get to level 2. Everyone should do that at least once in your life. It can be thrilling to navigate leveling up those really weak first level old school characters. It's a real sense of accomplishment. But more seriously, let's ask some questions about what's important to you to help make a decision here. I think one of the first things to consider is, do you mainly want to play old school adventures or OSR adventures without having to convert anything? If so, old school essential seems like a lot. Now, let me bring up one of my favorite examples, the old school ogre versus the Shadowdark ogre, to underline this conversion topic. All right, up top, we've got the old school essentials ogre. It's got 4 hit dice, 1 attack around, and picture in your mind's eye that party of 10 characters, like 4 player characters back there and 6 mercenaries. Ogres would show up all the time as bosses in those old adventures. There's one in like the second or third cave of the Keep on the Borderlands and the Caves of Chaos. There's one in one of the first rooms of the dungeon of the Moat House at the village of Hamlet. So your first level player characters will run into ogres. The ogre is probably going to kill a mercenary a round that it hits. It's not going to hit every round. And so your big party they've got a few rounds as it chews through your mercenaries to try to whittle it down. But most importantly about that old school ogre, it can be put to sleep with the humble level 1 sleep spell, which it's a staple of almost every first level magic user in old school D&D. So if they've saved their sleep spell, it's an easy way to take care of the ogre. Now cast your eyes on the Shadowdark ogre. It's been up-leveled to level 6. It gets 2 attacks around. It does a horrendous amount of damage. It cannot be sleeped. And yet that party of like 4 level 1 Shadowdark characters is meant to take this on. Well, sort of. Yes, you can beat an ogre in Shadowdark with first level characters, but your players have to play well. They can't stand toe-to-toe. They're going to have to use some kind of tactics to whittle it down. But their characters are a lot more capable. They've got more magic. They've got more healing, and they can do it. And this herein shows the difference between the two games. If you're going to run old school adventures, like TSR era adventures with Shadowdark, you have to convert the monsters or the Shadowdark characters will just walk all over it. The Shadowdark versions of the monsters have been beefed up to account for the fact that the characters are just so much more capable. And if there isn't an equivalent in Shadowdark, you're going to want to convert the old school monster from the module on your own. So I think the first criteria to really think about is like your comfort and relationship with doing these kind of conversions. Putting it all out like in a list. So like some of my pros for why you do old school essentials. 1, no conversions are needed. Second, you want that classic experience, weak characters with mercenaries trying to outthink the dungeon. And as I said, this is a more complete game, at least for right now. All the things that I think are missing from Shadowdark are in flight. They're coming with the most recent Kickstarter, so they'll be at parity soon. For Pro Shadowdark, I think the biggest one is just how easy it is to onboard modern players. It's more forgiving, and it has elements that exist in modern play, things like the luck tokens, for instance, and plays really fast. My home groups are both like 6 players each. And I love a game that like moves really quickly around the table because it keeps everyone engaged and keeps the game moving really fast. I say this with sincerity. I do really love both these games. I think my advice for OSR enthusiasts, and if you're here watching my channel, you're an OSR enthusiast, I would imagine, is you should own and play both, specifically because of the differences in playstyle we just laid out. I think Shadowdark is a great game to onboard new people. So I think that's a good one to start with. It'll introduce modern players to the old school dungeon crawl play style. And then sometime when you're ready for a future campaign, you want your players and your players are game for that next level type of challenge, then bust out old school essentials for your next campaign. Now, when I was thinking about this video, I thought about covering like AD&D, BECME, and kind of other variants. Let me know your interest in talking about those sometime too. Otherwise, I'm interested in how many other people out there enjoy and play both of these, or are you like a tastes great, less filling kind of person? Which side you're on, let me know in the comments. And I'll see everyone next time.